All right, so welcome to this deep dive.
Yeah.
And today, we're doing something a little different.
Oh.
Yeah, instead of like our usual articles and research papers,
Yeah.
we're going to kind of explore a full podcast episode dedicated to the incredible Pharoah Sanders.
Wow.
It's like we're taking a deep dive into someone else's deep dive.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's like adding another layer of interpretation to an already fascinating topic.
Yeah, and the topic couldn't be more captivating.
Yeah.
We're talking about a true innovator in jazz, Pharoah Sanders.
Yeah.
He wasn't just playing saxophone,
Right.
He was weaving spirituality into his music, pushing boundaries, creating a sound that's both raw and transcendent.
Mm-hmm.
Think Coltrane,
Yeah.
but infused with Eastern mysticism and a whole lot of soul.
His music really does have this incredible power to transport you. You can feel the raw emotion, the spiritual searching in every note.
So to really understand his music, we need to understand his journey. Born Pharoah Sanders in 1940, he later adopted the name Pharoah. I'm curious, how did that come about?
Yeah, the name Pharoah was given to him by Sun Ra, a truly avant-garde jazz musician who became a mentor to Sanders during a particularly challenging time in his life. Sanders had moved to New York City, and believe it or not, he actually experienced homelessness for a while.
Homelessness. For a jazz legend, that's hard to imagine.
It is, isn't it? It's a reminder that even the most iconic figures often face incredible struggles on their path to success.
Right.
But this meeting with Sun Ra was a pivotal moment for Sanders.
Oh, wow.
Sun Ra offered him shelter, encouragement, and a space to nurture his artistry.
Wow, talk about a life-changing encounter.
Yeah.
And from there, he went on to join John Coltrane's band, another major turning point in his career.
Absolutely. Coltrane, even at that time, was already pushing the boundaries of jazz, exploring modal scales and free improvisation.
Right.
Sanders joined the band during a period of intense experimentation, contributing to albums like Ascension and Meditations.
Oh, wow.
These albums actually caused quite a stir back then because they deviated so strongly from traditional jazz structures.
I can only imagine. And this is where things get even more interesting, wouldn't you say? Coltrane's own spiritual leanings, his explorations of Eastern philosophy, it seems like that all had a profound impact on Sanders.
You're absolutely right. This period was deeply formative for Sanders, both musically and spiritually. He was absorbing Coltrane's musical innovations, but also his profound spirituality and his dedication to pushing creative boundaries.
You know, listening to Sanders' music, you can really hear that influence, but there's also this entirely unique sound that he developed.
Yes.
The way he uses overblowing and multiphonics. It's almost like the saxophonist singing, crying out, sometimes even laughing.
It's a very visceral experience. He wasn't afraid to push the instrument to its absolute limits, creating sounds that many people hadn't heard before. He was known for his sheets of sound approach, using overblowing and multiphonics to create a dense, almost orchestral texture with the saxophone. I have to admit, some of those sounds can be pretty out there, even for a seasoned listener like myself. How does he create those otherworldly sounds?
Well, let's take overblowing, for example. This technique involves pushing air through the instrument with much greater force than usual. Imagine a powerful gust of wind suddenly rushing through the saxophone.
Okay.
This creates a higher-pitched sound, often with a raw, almost distorted quality. You can really hear this in his song Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt.
Okay.
The intensity of the saxophone almost mirrors the searing heat of the Egyptian desert.
That's a great way to put it. I can practically feel the sand and sun just listening to the music.
Yeah.
So what about this multiphonics technique?
Right.
Is it as complicated as it sounds?
It involves some very intricate fingerings and embouchure techniques, manipulating the airflow to create overtones and harmonics. Imagine a single voice suddenly splitting into multiple harmonies. That's essentially what Sanders was doing with the saxophone.
That's incredible. And it seems like he didn't shy away from incorporating his voice into his playing either.
Right.
Those growls and moans, those almost chanting-like sounds, are those all coming from the saxophone?
That's right. It's amazing how he manages to blend his voice with the instrument sound to create this raw, almost guttural texture that's so unique.
Yeah.
You can hear this in The Creator Has a Master Plan,
Oh, yeah.
a 30-minute epic from his Karma album, where his voice and saxophone seem to be engaged in a sort of spiritual dialogue.
Oh, yes, the creator has a master plan. It's such a powerful piece of music. It's more than just a song. It feels like a sonic tapestry, woven with spiritual threads.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of his ability to blend Eastern and African elements with jazz, creating a truly immersive spiritual experience. You hear those hypnotic chants, those intense sax wails, almost like cries of the soul, and it feels like you're being transported to another realm.
It's not just music, it's a journey. It really showcases what spiritual jazz is all about.
It really does. But what's remarkable is that Sanders' journey didn't end there.
Right.
He continued to explore and evolve, collaborating with a diverse range of artists throughout his career.
That's what I find so fascinating about him. He
Yeah.
didn't let himself be, like, boxed in, He constantly pushed himself creatively. I'm particularly curious about those later collaborations with artists like Floating Points and the London Symphony Orchestra. Those seem like such unexpected pairings.
They were, and those collaborations led to some truly beautiful and groundbreaking music.
Yeah.
But before we dive into those, let's take a step back and explore some of the key influences that shaped his musical path.
Great idea, because to understand Pharoah Sanders, we need to understand the roots of his sound.
Absolutely. So we've touched upon the profound influence, John Coltrane had on Pharoah Sanders,
Right.
both musically and spiritually. But there's another key influence that we haven't mentioned yet, the music of the American South.
Oh.
Sanders' early life was steeped in the sounds of gospel, blues, and R&B, and these genres really seeped into his musical DNA.
That's so interesting. I can definitely hear those bluesy inflections in his playing, that soulful cry that seems to come straight from the heart.
Exactly. And it's not just about the notes, it's about the feeling, the raw emotion that he pours into his music.
Mm-hmm.
You can trace those roots back to the church, to those gospel singers who would move congregations with their powerful voices and heartfelt delivery.
So in a way, he was blending the sacred and the secular,
Yes.
the spiritual and the earthly in his music.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And this fusion of influences, this willingness to break down musical boundaries is what makes his sound so unique and so captivating.
You mentioned earlier that he continued to evolve throughout his career, collaborating with artists from diverse backgrounds. Could you tell us more about that? I'm particularly intrigued by his later collaborations with Floating Points and the London Symphony Orchestra. How did those come about?
Well, Floating Points, a British electronic musician, had been a longtime admirer of Sanders' work.
Okay.
He reached out to Sanders with the idea of creating something together, and the result was the 2021 album, Promises.
Okay.
It's a beautiful and meditative piece of music, with Sanders' saxophone soaring over Floating Point's lush electronic arrangements.
Wow.
It's a testament to Sanders' openness to new sounds and his ability to connect with artists from different generations and genres.
That's incredible. So even late in his career, he was still pushing boundaries and embracing new possibilities.
Yeah.
And what about the collaboration with the London Symphony Orchestra? That must have been quite a departure from his usual sound.
It was. In 2015, Sanders performed with the London Symphony Orchestra, conducted by the acclaimed jazz pianist Brad Mehldau.
Right.
The performance featured Sanders' own compositions, arranged for orchestra, showcasing his music in a whole new light.
It's amazing to think of those soaring saxophone melodies being accompanied by a full orchestra.
It is.
Did these collaborations change or influence his own musical style in any way?
It's hard to say for sure, but I think they definitely broadened his horizons and introduced him to new audiences.
Mm-hmm.
These collaborations demonstrate his versatility and his ability to move seamlessly between different musical worlds.
So we've talked about his incredible journey, his groundbreaking techniques, and the diverse influences that shaped his music.
Right.
But I think we need to delve a bit deeper into spiritual jazz itself.
Yeah.
What exactly is it?
Yeah.
And how did Pharoah Sanders help define this genre?
That's a great question. You see, spiritual jazz isn't just about playing gospel melodies or incorporating religious themes.
Okay.
It's about using music as a vehicle for spiritual exploration and expression. Think of it as a musical quest for transcendence, a way to connect with something larger than yourself, whether that's a higher power, a sense of universal oneness, or simply a deeper level of consciousness.
So it's more about feeling than form, about tapping into something beyond the notes themselves.
Yeah, precisely. And Pharoah Sanders, with his intense emotionality, his exploration of non-Western sounds, and his fearless use of unconventional techniques, was truly a pioneer of this movement.
Right.
Albums like Karma and Jewels of Thought are considered cornerstones of spiritual jazz,
Yeah.
embodying this fusion of musical traditions and this yearning for transcendence that defines the genre.
Karma is a great example.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier how the creator has a master plan from that album, really showcases what spiritual jazz is all about. It's not just a song, it's like a sonic prayer,
Yes.
a meditation that guides you inward.
Yes. You can really feel the spiritual yearning in that piece, that desire to connect with something beyond the material world. The use of chanting, the interplay between the saxophone and the vocals, it's all designed to create a sense of transcendence, to transport the listener to a higher plane of existence.
And it's not just the music itself, it's the way he plays, the raw emotion he pours into every note.
Yeah.
You can feel the sincerity, the authenticity in his playing.
Absolutely. It's like he's channeling something deep within himself, something that transcends language and speaks directly to the soul.
You know, it's remarkable how he manages to capture those intangible spiritual concepts in his music,
Right.
to make them audible and relatable. What do you think is the key to his ability to connect with listeners on such a deep level?
I think it's his authenticity. He wasn't trying to be something he wasn't.
Right.
He was playing from the heart, expressing his own spiritual journey through music. And that honesty, that vulnerability resonates with people on a deep level.
It makes you feel like you're on that journey with him, experiencing the highs and lows, the searching and the yearning through his music.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of spiritual jazz. It's not just about listening, it's about participating, about connecting with something larger than yourself.
It's about opening your heart and your mind to the possibilities of music as a spiritual force.
Beautifully put. But what about his legacy? How has Pharoah Sanders' music continued to influence the musical landscape, even after his passing?
That's a great question, because his impact extends far beyond his own recordings and performances.
It does.
It's like he planted seeds that have continued to blossom in the work of countless other musicians. Yeah, it feels like Pharoah Sanders' influence is almost like a ripple effect expanding outwards, touching so many different corners of the music world.
That's a great way to visualize it. He wasn't just a musician, he was a catalyst for change, an innovator who inspired countless others to explore new sonic territories.
And it's not just limited to jazz musicians, right? You mentioned earlier that his influence can be heard in genres like electronic music, ambient music, even hip-hop.
Absolutely. His music transcended genre. It wasn't bound by traditional categories. It was about pure expression, a search for something deeper, something that connected with the human spirit, regardless of musical labels.
I've noticed a resurgence of interest in spiritual jazz lately, especially among younger generations. Do you think Sanders' legacy has played a role in this renewed interest?
Definitely. We're seeing artists like Kamasi Washington, Shabaka Hutchings, and Nubia Garcia all drawing inspiration from Sanders' work. They're carrying the torch, pushing the boundaries of jazz, while still honoring the spiritual essence of the music. It's like they're building upon the foundation that Sanders laid down decades ago.
It's almost like a musical lineage, passing the torch from one generation to the next.
I love that analogy. And it's not just about imitation, it's about taking those core elements of spiritual jazz, the yearning for transcendence, the raw emotion, the exploration of non-Western sounds, and reinterpreting them in fresh and exciting ways.
So it's about honoring the past while still forging a new path forward.
Exactly. And that's the mark of a true innovator. Someone whose influence not only endures but also evolves, inspiring new generations of artists to find their own unique voices within a shared tradition.
That's a beautiful way to put it. So for our listener who might be just starting their deep dive into the world of Pharoah Sanders, what would you recommend as a good starting point?
I'd say start with Karma. It's a truly transformative album, one that really encapsulates the essence of his spiritual and musical vision. The centerpiece of that album, The Creator Has a Master Plan, is a journey in itself. A 30-minute sonic exploration that takes you through a whole range of emotions and spiritual experiences.
It's one of those pieces of music that you can listen to over and over again and still discover something new each time.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to explore his vast discography. There's so much to discover there, from those early free jazz explorations with Coltrane to those meditative masterpieces like Jewels of Thought, and even those later collaborations with artists like Floating Points. It's a treasure trove of music waiting to be explored.
So it's really about taking that first step, embarking on that journey of discovery.
Absolutely. And as you listen, don't get too caught up in analyzing the music. Just let it wash over you. Let it move you. Let it speak to your soul.
Let Pharoah Sanders be your guide on a musical and spiritual adventure.
Beautifully said. His music is a gift, a testament to the power of human expression and the enduring search for meaning and connection.
On that note, we'll leave you with this thought. Let the music of Pharoah Sanders be your companion on your own journey of self-discovery. Who knows what you might find along the way?